She had hired 9 bodyguards to protect her daughter, 9 trained professionals, 9 men with credentials, references, and combat experience, 9 different faces that made a 7-year-old girl press herself against the wall and whisper, "Please don't make him stay." Elena Marsh had built a billion-dollar aerospace company from the ground up. She had stared down hostile takeovers, survived a public divorce, and negotiated contracts that made men twice her age sweat through their collars. But she could not make her daughter feel safe. Then came number 10, and the moment Lily Marsh looked at him, this quiet, unremarkable man standing in the marble foyer with his hands loose at his sides, she didn't retreat. She didn't cry. She leaned up and pressed her lips to her mother's ear and said the 7 words that changed everything. "Mom, I know him and I really like him." Elena went still. She had never seen this man before in her life. So, how did her daughter know him? If this is your first time here, welcome. And please consider subscribing to the channel so you never miss a story. Hit the like button if you want to see more and drop a comment telling me what city or country you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. Now, stay with me because this one goes somewhere you will not expect. The morning it started, Elena was already 40 minutes behind. That was unusual. She ran her schedule the way she ran her company, with enough margin built in that small disasters couldn't metastasize into large ones. But her 6:30 call with the Singapore procurement team had stretched past 8. And then her CFO had appeared in her doorway with the kind of expression that meant the problem couldn't wait. And by the time she'd handled both, the household had already shifted into its own particular brand of chaos without her. She found Lily at the breakfast table, still in her pajamas at 8:47, eating cereal with one hand and holding a book about deep-sea fish with the other. The nanny, Teresa, was somewhere near the back of the house, arguing quietly with the kitchen contractor about a cabinet that still hadn't been rehung after 3 weeks. The previous night's security report sat unopened on the counter. Elena poured herself coffee that had gone lukewarm and stood at the window for a moment, looking out at the back lawn. The security post at the far edge of the property was empty again. She set down the mug. "Teresa." Her voice was control, but Teresa appeared in the doorway within 4 seconds, which meant she'd heard the tone. "Mr. Danvers called in sick," Teresa said before Elena could ask. "He left a voicemail at 6. I thought you'd seen it." "I hadn't." "I'm sorry, Miss Marsh. I tried to reach the agency." "Don't." Elena held up one hand. "It's not your job to reach the agency. That's the point." She didn't say anything else. She finished the coffee, cold as it was, and went back upstairs to make the call herself. That was the 9th, not the 9th sick day, though there had been enough of those. The 9th bodyguard in 14 months, who had in one way or another failed to be the thing she actually needed. Consistent, calm, and capable of making her daughter feel like the world wasn't a threat. 3 had quit because Lily was difficult around them. 1 had lasted exactly 6 days before he'd raised his voice at a paparazzo outside Lily's school, and Elena had let him go the same afternoon. 2 had come with excellent references and turned out to have serious personal issues that disqualified them entirely. 1 had treated the job like a temporary assignment, which she supposed it had been. 1 had tried genuinely, but Lily's fear of strangers was bad enough that she'd started having nightmares again within a week of his arrival, and Elena had made the call. And now Danvers, who had seemed solid, had apparently decided that a sick day without real notice was acceptable. She sat on the edge of her bed and called her head of security. Victor Cole picked up on the second ring, which he always did. 14 years with the company, the last 4 as head of the division. He was careful, methodical, and thorough in the way that people who'd spent long careers in risk management tended to be. Elena trusted him the way she trusted the structural reports on her buildings completely because she'd never had reason not to. "I know," he said before she spoke. "I've already been in contact with the agency." 9. Victor. A pause. "I know. I need someone different, not from the same pool. Whoever they've been sending me has been wrong, and I'm starting to think the problem is with the source, not the individuals." "I've been thinking the same thing." He sounded like he'd been awake for a while. I have someone. He's not agency, former military, elite background, though he's deliberately kept a low profile since leaving service. He's been doing independent security consulting for the last 4 years. Solid record, no incidents, spotless references. I've worked with him once before on a lower profile assignment and he was exactly what he said he was. How old? 37, single father. He has an 8-year-old boy. Elena didn't respond immediately. I know you've had concerns about live-in arrangements, Victor said carefully. The concern isn't living. The concern is that every person I brought into this house has made Lily feel like a prisoner in it. She looked at the door, which was open, and could hear Lily downstairs asking Teresa something about whether anglerfish could survive in swimming pools. She's 7. She's already anxious. I don't need someone who treats the property like a military installation and terrifies my daughter in the process. He doesn't operate that way. That's why I thought of him. Name, Ethan Cross. She wrote it down. Send me everything you have. I'll review it tonight and we'll set something up for Thursday. I'll reach out to him today. She hung up and sat for another moment in the quiet. From downstairs, she heard Lily laugh at something. A real laugh, clear and sudden, and the tightness in Elena's chest loosened just slightly. She picked up the phone again and rescheduled her 9:30. Thursday came gray and cold, the kind of late October morning where the light never really arrived. Elena had read Ethan Cross' file twice the night before and once again over breakfast while Lily ate toast and complained that her school was doing a fire drill that afternoon. And fire drills were the worst thing ever invented. Worse than mosquitoes? Elena said, not looking up from the file. Lily considered this with great seriousness. About the same. The file was thorough, if deliberately sparse in certain areas. Military service was listed with a gap that suggested something more classified than standard infantry. She'd seen that pattern before to contractors and private security professionals who'd held clearances didn't always advertise what they'd done, and reputable ones didn't lie about it either. They simply declined to specify. For years of independent work since leaving the service, 2 long-term private family assignments, both of which had ended because the families relocated internationally. 3 references, all of whom Victor had called personally and reported back were, in his word, emphatic. One detail she kept returning to under a reason for leaving active service. The file said simply, Family Circumstances 2020. His son would have been about 4 in 2020. Elena set the file down. He arrived at 10:15. She heard the car on the driveway and watched from the upstairs window for a moment before going down. He drove a clean but ordinary dark blue sedan, the kind of car that was designed not to stand out. He got out carefully, not slowly, but with the kind of deliberate economy of movement that some people had and most didn't. He wore dark pants and a simple gray jacket, no tie. He stood for a moment and looked at the front of the house, and even from this distance, Elena could tell he was cataloging the angles. Not nervously, just as a matter of habit. She went downstairs. Teresa let him in and Elena came through from the sitting room with her hand extended before he'd taken 2 steps into the foyer. Mr. Cross, I'm Elena Marsh. Ms. Marsh. His handshake was firm and brief. He had gray eyes, steady and calm, and a quality of stillness about him that she'd occasionally encountered in people who had spent significant time in places where stillness mattered. He wasn't imposing in the way that some security professionals work to be imposing. He was simply present in a way that was hard to articulate. Can I get you coffee? She asked. I'm fine, thank you. She led him into the sitting room and they sat across from each other. She'd done this 9 times. She developed something close to a script for it. The questions she asked, the things she watched for, the early signals that usually told her within 20 minutes whether it was going to work. Tell me what Victor told you about the position. She said, single-parent household, 1 child, 7 years old. Previous security arrangements haven't been sustainable. You need someone who can provide coverage without making the home feel like a controlled environment. That's accurate as far as it goes. She looked at him directly. What Victor may not have told you is that my daughter has developed significant anxiety around strangers over the last 2 years. She's 7, not 17. I want to be clear about that because some of the people I've interviewed have seemed to think anxiety in children is a behavioral problem they can train out. Something in his face shifted just slightly. It's not. No, it isn't. She paused. She's been through a fair amount of disruption for a child her age. Her father left when she was 3. I've had people cycling through this house on a fairly regular basis. Nannies, household staff, and now 9 rounds of security personnel. She's adaptive, but she's also learned correctly that strangers often mean change, and change in our world has usually meant something destabilizing. He was quiet for a moment. How does she react to the presence of security in practical terms? She retreats. She stops talking. She starts having trouble sleeping. Elena kept her voice level. The last one before he called in sick and ended his own tenure. She wouldn't come downstairs for dinner 3 nights in a row because she didn't want to be in the same room with him. Ethan didn't respond immediately, and she appreciated that. He seemed to be actually thinking rather than reaching for reassurance. What does she enjoy? He asked. Elena blinked. I'm sorry. Your daughter. What does she like to do? It wasn't the question she'd expected. She likes science, specifically animals, marine biology at the moment, though 3 months ago it was insects. She likes drawing. She likes building things, blocks, or craft projects. She's learning chess, but she doesn't like losing yet. A pause. She likes paper airplanes. Something changed in his expression. It was subtle, not dramatic, not a visible flinch or a sharp intake of breath, just a slight stillness, a fraction of a second where he seemed to recalibrate something internally. His eyes didn't move from her face, but something shifted behind them. Elena noticed. She filed it away. What is it? She asked. Nothing. He said it without any defensive quality, which was interesting. Just something that occurred to me. Before she could follow the thread, the sitting room door opened. Lily was not supposed to be home yet. Teresa had taken her to her weekly art class on the other side of the city, an arrangement Elena had specifically made so that this morning could unfold without the complication of her daughter's reaction influencing her own judgment before she'd formed one. But there Lily was in the doorway in her coat and boots, cheeks flushed from the cold, her backpack slung over one shoulder. Teresa appeared behind her looking apologetic. The class was cancelled, Teresa said. The teacher had a family emergency. I texted. It's fine, Elena said, already standing. Lily, come in. Close the door. It's cold. Lily came in. She did what she always did around strangers, not retreating all the way, but hovering near the door with her shoulders pulled slightly inward, her eyes going immediately to the unfamiliar man on the other side of the room. Elena moved toward her. This is Mr. Cross. He's someone I'm talking to about a job. Lily looked at it. Her expression went through several things in rapid succession. The initial weariness, the familiar tension around her eyes that Elena recognized and hated, and then something else. The tension broke. Lily stared, not with fear, with something that looked remarkably like recognition. Ethan Cross sat very still. Lily walked across the room, stopping about 3 feet from him, and looked at him the way children look at things they are trying to make sense of carefully without self-consciousness. I know you, she said. Lily, Elena began. I do. She said it simply, as if it were a fact she was reporting rather than a claim she was making. She turned to her mother, and what Elena saw on her daughter's face was something she had not seen in 14 months of searching. Absolute uncomplicated ease. Lily went up on her toes and pressed her mouth to Elena's ear. Mom, I know him and I really like him. Elena pulled back and looked at her daughter's face. Then she looked at Ethan Cross, who was looking at Lily with an expression that was controlled and careful and not quite managing to be unreadable. Mr. Cross, Elena said. Her voice was pleasant, And it was the pleasantness of a woman who had spent 15 years building a company in an industry that did not welcome her, which meant it had a great deal of precision behind it. "I'd like to know if you've met my daughter before a beat." "Miss Marsh," he said, "that's a longer answer than it might seem." "Then I suggest you start at the beginning." He looked at Lily, who was watching him with the open, patient attention of a child who already knew the story and was waiting to hear if the adult would get it right. And then back at Elena. "About 6 months ago," he said, "I took my son to the Hargrove Science Museum downtown. There was a fire alarm." Elena went very still. She remembered the fire alarm. Teresa had called her from the museum, voice pitched just slightly too high, saying everything was fine. Everyone was fine. Lily had gotten a little separated in the crowd during the evacuation, but it had sorted itself out before she could even get there. Sorted itself out. "It wasn't a drill," Ethan continued, and his voice was steady. The lobby emptied fast. There was a lot of confusion. "I came out through the east doors with Sam, my son, and there was a little girl sitting by herself near the fountain." He glanced at Lily. "She was crying," he said. Lily nodded unself-consciously. "I was really scared," she confirmed. Elena looked at her daughter, then back at him. "Go on." "I didn't want to startle her. She didn't know me in a man approaching a frightened child in a public space. I was aware of what that looks like. So, I sat down about 10 feet away, and I had Sam start folding paper airplanes." He paused. "Sam's very good at paper airplanes. He practices constantly. He gave me one," Lily said to her mother. "It had little wings that were uneven, but it flew really far." "She stopped crying," Ethan said. "We talked for a few minutes. I spotted her nanny about 100 yards out, got Lily's attention redirected that direction, and once I could see the nanny had her, I left." Elena's mouth was dry. "You left?" "I didn't know who she was. I didn't see any reason to make the moment larger than it needed to be." "I see." Elena sat down because standing suddenly felt effortful. "Teresa told me she got separated and then found in that order. She didn't tell me how. Teresa didn't know. Lily said she was looking the other way." Elena looked at her daughter. "Why didn't you tell me?" Lily considered this with the same seriousness she applied to everything. "You were working and I didn't want you to be more worried." 7 years old, already managing her mother's anxiety like it was something she was responsible for. Elena felt that like a hand pressing down on her sternum. That's she stopped, redirected. "We're going to talk about that later." She turned back to Ethan. "You said that was a longer answer than it seemed. Is there more?" His expression remained even. He had the quality of someone who was used to delivering information that was going to be unwelcome and had learned not to lead with apology. "Yes," he said. There was a second time. The room was very quiet. Outside, somewhere past the gray windows, a car passed on the street. The heating system clicked and settled. Elena waited, and she was aware that her hands, folded in her lap, were pressing against each other with more force than was necessary. 3 weeks after the museum. Ethan said, "Sam and I were in Belmore Park on a Saturday morning. I saw Lily with her nanny on the east path." He said it directly. No softening. There was a man following them. Elena's jaw tightened. "I don't know if it was purposeful. I can tell you that he changed direction when they changed direction twice and that he closed distance when the nanny stopped to check her phone. He kept his voice neutral, informational. I moved myself and Sam between them and the man without making a scene. I stayed parallel to them on the path until he gave up and left. Then I took Sam to the other side of the park." Lily was watching her mother's face carefully. "The nanny didn't see him," Ethan added. "She was distracted." Lily did. Elena looked at her daughter. Lily gave a small uncomfortable shrug. "He was looking at me weird, but then the man with Sam walked nearby and the weird man went away." So she pulled at the strap of her backpack. I didn't think it was a big deal. Lily. Elena's voice came out quieter than she intended. Why didn't you tell me about any of this? The answer was the same as before. She could see it in her daughter's face before Lily said it. I didn't want you to worry more. Elena breathed in slowly through her nose and out through her mouth, which was something she'd learned in her second year of running the company when her cardiologist had suggested she either manage her stress differently or accept the consequences. Then she turned back to Ethan Cross, who was watching her with the same measured attention he'd brought to everything else in the last 20 minutes. You encountered my daughter twice, she said. In each case, you intervened and didn't report it. I didn't know who she was, he said. I wasn't in any professional capacity. I saw situations that needed handling and I handled them. And then you applied for a position as her bodyguard. I applied for a position in your security team. I didn't know it involved your daughter directly until Victor explained the scope. Elena studied him. He held her gaze without discomfort, without the slightly performed steadiness of someone working to appear trustworthy. He just sat there. I have to ask you something, she said, and I want you to understand that I am asking it because I have been doing this for 14 months, and I have learned to ask the things that feel uncomfortable. All right. Is it possible that encountering my daughter twice was not coincidence? The question sat in the air between them. Ethan didn't look offended. He looked like someone who had already considered the question himself, and had been waiting to see if she was sharp enough to ask it. It's possible, he said. The honesty of it caught her slightly off guard. I've thought about it, he continued. Both encounters were in public locations I frequented with Sam. What I ask is that you treat that information with the same care you'd treat classified material. Not because I'm paranoid, but because I'd had situations where schedule information ended up somewhere it shouldn't have. He looked at her steadily. What kind of situations? She'd decided to be direct about this. She'd almost not been had considered easing him into the context over a few weeks, but the background check had settled something in her about trusting her own instincts. 3 incidents in the last year, small ones, nothing that escalated into anything serious on its face, but the timing each time correlated with changes I'd made to my calendar or Lily's schedule. Could be coincidence. Probably is, but I've started to wonder. He was quiet for a moment. Who has access to the calendar? My EA, Victor, Teresa, the household manager who left in September, and the previous 3 security personnel. Did any of the incidents happen after the household manager left? She blinked. It was a sharp question asked quickly and without preamble. Yes, 2 of the 3. So, it's not her. He said it without satisfaction, just as a narrowing of the field. I'd like to review the incident reports when you have time, just to understand the pattern. I'll have copies sent to you. He nodded, and that was that. No reassurance, no promise to get to the bottom of it, no performance of competence, just the acknowledgement and the next practical step. Elena thought about Diane's words. The ones who've seen the worst of it don't talk about it the way people expect. Lily came downstairs at 8:03, still in her socks, carrying a library book about cephalopods she'd apparently been reading since 6 o'clock. She stopped 2 steps from the bottom when she saw Ethan, but it wasn't the stop Elena was used to. The freeze, the slight lean back, the eyes going to her mother for permission. It was something different, a recalibration. You're here, Lily said. I am, Ethan said. Is Sam at school? He is. Same time as you'll be going. Lily considered this. His school starts at 8. 8:15, mine's 8:30. She came down the last 2 steps and went to the refrigerator, apparently satisfied. Do you want to see my book? It's about octopuses, but also squids. Sure. After I eat. She got off the orange juice with the focused efficiency of a child who had been managing her own breakfast for long enough to have opinions about the process. Mom, the coffee maker smells weird. Ethan's fixing it. Lily glanced over at him. Do you know how to fix things? Some things.
Our dishwasher makes a grinding noise on the second cycle. Lily, Elena said, I'm just telling him.
She poured her juice without spilling any of it, which was not always the outcome, and sat down at the table.
You don't have to fix it. I was just saying. Ethan looked at Elena.
She gave the very slight shrug of a mother who had long since stopped trying to redirect every conversational tangent her daughter produced.
I can take a look at it, he said to Lily. Okay, she opened her book. The giant Pacific octopus can unscrew jar lids.
They figured that out by giving them jars with food inside.
I knew that, Ethan said. Lily looked up surprised and pleased. How? Sam went through an octopus phase last year. I know more about cephalopods than I ever expected to.
The expression on Lily's face was not a smile exactly. It was something warmer than that, something closer to recognition. The look of a child who has spent a long time feeling like the things she cared about were too specific and too strange for most people to follow. Suddenly finding someone on the other side of the table who had been to the same strange country through a different door.
Elena watched this from across the kitchen and said nothing. Us.
The first 2 weeks were imperfect in the ways that first weeks tend to be. Ethan was careful, not cautiously, stiffly careful, but thoughtfully so, in a way that suggested he was making deliberate choices rather than defaulting to protocol. He didn't shadow Lily in the way the previous guards had, the constant presence at 3 feet that had made her feel like a specimen being observed. He positioned himself differently.
Present at perimeter, visible when needed, genuinely in the background when not.
At school drop-off, he stayed by the car rather than walking her to the door, which was what Lily wanted, and which the previous 3 guards had refused to accommodate because it wasn't in their security assessment. There were frictions. He and Elena disagreed twice in the first week about schedule decisions. Once about a last-minute change to Lily's after-school pickup route that Elena had made without consulting him, and once about a public event Elena had accepted that he felt was poorly secured. Neither disagreement was dramatic. They had the quality of 2 people who were both accustomed to being right in their respective domains and were working out the boundary between those domains. You don't need to approve my social calendar, Elena said during the second conversation, which happened in the hallway outside her office at 8:30 in the evening.
I'm not trying to, Ethan said.
I'm telling you that the venue's private security company has 3 open complaints with the city licensing board, and the layout puts your position relative to the main entrance in a way I can't adequately manage with 1 person.
Then I'll bring additional coverage for the evening. That's all I'm asking. She looked at him. He looked back.
Neither of them was angry exactly, but neither was fully comfortable, and Elena thought that was probably healthy. The alternative was a man who agreed with her to keep the peace, and she'd had enough of those. I'll call Victor about supplemental coverage. She said, thank you. He turned to leave and she said, Callum.
He stopped. You can tell me when you think I'm wrong.
That's part of why you're here. Just she chose the words. Be straight with me about what's a genuine security concern and what's a preference.
I can do that. Good.
He left and she stood in the hallway for a moment and then went back into her office and finished reviewing the contract. The disagreements were manageable. What wasn't manageable, what Elena found herself increasingly unable to categorize or set aside, was the thing happening between the children.
Sam started coming on Saturdays. This had not been part of any plan.
It emerged gradually, the way things in households tend to emerge, through small accommodations that build into patterns. The first Saturday, Ethan had a scheduling conflict with Sam's regular weekend arrangement and asked carefully whether it would be acceptable for Sam to accompany them to Lily's science class field trip to the Botanical Conservatory. Elena had said yes because the alternative was Ethan missing work or Lily missing the trip, and both seemed like worse options. Lily and Sam spent 3 hours in the conservatory together, arguing in the focused, companionable way of children who have already decided they like each other and are now establishing the terms. They disagreed about whether the Venus flytrap display was more interesting than the carnivorous pitcher plant display.
Sam maintained that the flytrap was objectively superior because it moved. Lily countered that movement was less important than digestive sophistication.
Neither convinced the other, and both seemed satisfied with this outcome. On the drive home, Lily fell asleep with her head against the car window, and Sam sat beside her reading a book about paper folding, and Ethan drove, and Elena sat in the front passenger seat and looked at the three of them in the rearview mirror and felt something she didn't want to look at too directly yet. The second Saturday, Lily asked at breakfast whether Sam was coming again.
"I don't know," Elena said.
"That's a question for Ethan."
"Can you ask him?"
"You can ask him."
Lily considered the social mechanics of this. What if he says no? Then Sam isn't coming this Saturday.
But would he say no for a reason or just because of rules?
Elena sat down her coffee.
"You're going to have this conversation yourself, Lily."
Lily went and found Ethan in the front hallway where he was reviewing the security log.
And Elena heard from the kitchen a conversation she couldn't quite make out, but whose emotional shape was entirely legible. The slight hesitancy of a child making a request they care about, followed by a pause, followed by what sounded like a yes. Sam came both Saturdays after that. By the fourth week, it wasn't an event. It was just Saturday. It was during the fifth week that things stopped being a staffing arrangement and started being something Elena couldn't entirely categorize. She came home early from a meeting that had ended faster than expected. And she let herself in through the side entrance because the front gate code was taking too long to enter on her phone. And she walked into the kitchen and found all three of them at the table.
Sam and Lily were playing chess.
Sam moving quickly and with the impatient confidence of someone who expected to win. Lily moving slowly and with the focused intensity of someone who had decided not to.
Ethan was at the far end of the table eating a sandwich and reading something on his phone, and the television in the adjacent room was on low with some nature documentary about migratory birds that no one was watching. None of them heard her come in. She stood in the doorway for a moment. It wasn't domestic in any performed or idealized way.
Sam knocked over his water glass, reaching for a piece, soaking 2 pawns in part of the board, and said a word that made Ethan look up sharply and say his name in a flat warning tone. And Sam had the grace to look at Lily and apologized with visible discomfort.
Lily patted the wetboard with her sleeve in a businesslike way and said it was fine. They kept playing. Ethan went back to his phone.
Elena stood there another moment and then she backed quietly out of the doorway and went up the back stairs to her office, and she sat down and stared at her desk and did not immediately reach for her email. She was thinking about what the inside of this house had felt like 18 months ago.
The silence that had a different quality than quiet. Lily eating dinner in her room.
The security reports stacking up with their accumulated record of failure. The way Elena had moved through her own home like she was passing through it rather than living in it. She reached for her email, but the image stayed with her. The third incident happened on a Thursday, and it was not small. Elena had a board presentation at the downtown Marsh Aeronautics offices, a quarterly review that required her physical presence, and that she hadn't been able to reschedule when Lily's school closed unexpectedly for a half day due to a burst pipe in the gymnasium. Ethan adjusted without complaint, rerouting Lily to the corporate offices for the afternoon rather than the house, setting her up in a small conference room with her homework and a cleared tablet for approved entertainment. The offices had their own security team separate from the household detail. Ethan knew the setup and had used the building before, but he'd expressed quietly to Elena before they left that he preferred her regular schedule to ad hoc changes when it could be avoided.
"It's not avoidable today," she'd said. "I know. I'm not arguing. I'm just noting it."
She'd noted his noting and moved on.
The presentation ran long. Presentations always ran long when the CFO was in the room and the numbers had any ambiguity in them.
Elena was 60 minutes into an expected 40-minute slot when her phone buzzed with a message from Ethan.
"Lily, fine. Heads up.
Staff member I don't recognize tried to access the conference room twice. Told both times she was in a private meeting.
She's with me now."
Elena read it once, kept her expression neutral, and wrapped the presentation in 8 minutes. She found them in the security monitoring room on the building's second floor, which was not where she'd left them. Lily was on a rolling chair eating crackers from her lunch bag and watching 2 screens that showed elevator feeds. Ethan was standing near the door, and the building's head of on-site security, a man named Foster, was near the terminal looking like a man who was managing his feelings about someone operating in his space without invitation.
Who was it? Elena asked before anyone could offer context. Female mid-30s access badge from the legal department. Ethan said, she doesn't appear on the floor manifest I was given before we came in. I checked with Foster. She's a contractor brought on 6 weeks ago, not a regular staff member. Foster cleared his throat. Miss Marsh, I want to be clear that our screening. I'm not criticizing your screening, Foster. I'm asking questions. She looked at Ethan. Did she make contact with Lily? No. First time I redirected her before she reached the door. Second time I asked her directly what she needed and she said she was looking for a printer. The nearest printer to that conference room is 40 feet in the other direction and behind a different set of keycard access. Elena's jaw was tight. I want her badge suspended pending review. Already requested, Foster said. Thank you. She looked at Lily. Are you okay? I'm good. Lily said with the slightly over-measured calm of a child who was watching adult faces for information. Ethan said we were just being careful. I watched the elevator cameras. Did you know this building has 16 cameras on the parking level alone? I didn't know that number specifically. It's a lot. Lily ate a cracker. Is everything okay? Elena looked at her daughter, 7 years old, sitting in a monitoring room eating crackers, doing what Lily had always done, which was read the room and manage her own reaction to protect everyone around her, and felt the familiar complicated weight of that. Everything is fine, she said. Let's go home. In the car, with Lily asleep in the back 20 minutes outside the city, she always crashed after what she politely called a lot of day. Elena said quietly to Ethan. The contractor, what's your read? He kept his eyes on the road. Could be nothing. Could be curiosity. Building staff sometimes get nosy about executive visitors. He paused. But it's the third time in about 6 weeks that something low-level has happened near Lily outside the house. Elena turned to look at him. The museum alarm, he said. The man in the park. This. None of them are individually significant, but I've been looking at the dates against the incident reports you gave me. And the museum alarm happened 2 days after you confirmed a public appearance for Lily at the Aviation Heritage Gala. That appearance was on your shared calendar at the time. His voice was still even. The park encounter happened the Saturday after you added Lily's Saturday science class to the schedule. That was also on the shared calendar. Elena was very still. Today, he continued, was not on any standing schedule. It was an ad hoc change made this morning. Only 4 people knew about it before we left the house. Teresa, Elena said, Victor, my EA and me, Ethan said, I'm aware of that. She looked at his profile. I was watching the road with the same even attention he brought to everything. You're telling me you think someone with access to my internal calendar has been feeding information about Lily's movements? She said. I think it's worth taking seriously. Victor has managed my security arrangements for 4 years. Ethan didn't respond to that directly. I'm not pointing at anyone. I'm pointing at a pattern. What you do with it is your call. Elena turned and looked at Lily in the back seat, her daughter asleep now with her mouth slightly open and her library book sliding off her lap, entirely unaware of the conversation happening 6 feet away. 3 incidents, 3 correlations with calendar entries. The contractor today had walked to the wrong printer twice. I want to run a test, Elena said. What kind of test? I want to put a false event on the calendar. Something specific enough that if it's used, it'll be identifiable and then I want to see what happens. He was quiet for a moment. That's a reasonable approach. You'd need to keep the circle small. People who see the false entry and people who don't. I know how to run a controlled test, she said, and there was an edge in it.
The edge of a woman who had spent 15 years being underestimated in rooms where she was the only one in the room who understood the actual problem.
I know you do, he said simply. Not defensive, not conciliatory, just acknowledging. She exhaled slowly. I'll set it up this week, she said. I want you to keep the pattern analysis, dates, locations, calendar access, timestamps if you can get them. I can get some of them. For the full access logs, I'd need Victor to pull them. Neither of them said what that meant. They both understood it. The car moved through the dark on the highway, and Lily slept, and Elena watched the lights of the city recede behind them and thought about 14 months of trying to protect her daughter from threats she could identify and name. It hadn't occurred to her until now that the harder problem might be the ones that didn't have names yet, the ones sitting inside her own structure, wearing the right badge, knowing the right schedule. She thought about Ethan in the museum, sitting 10 feet from a crying child with a box of paper squares, deliberately not approaching, making himself unthreatening in the one way that would actually work. She thought about the park and a stranger closing distance and a man she didn't know stepping quietly into the space between her daughter and that stranger without making a scene. She didn't know yet whether hiring him had been coincidence or something else. But she was beginning to understand that coincidence or not, he had been paying attention to her daughter before anyone asked him to, and that in the current moment that mattered more than anything else. Ethan, she said. Yeah. The first time you saw Mia at the museum when she was crying, she looked at her hands in her lap. How long did it take before she stopped? He considered this 6-7 minutes maybe. Sam got through his third airplane before she smiled. What did she say before you got her back to the nanny? She asked if the airplane was named after anyone. I said Sam named all of them. He usually picked dinosaurs. She said hers should be named after an anglerfish. He glanced briefly at the rear-view mirror at Lily. She was very specific about which one. The deep-sea species, not the fresh water. Elena pressed her lips together. She would not do this here in the car in the dark. She was practiced at this. Thank you, she for both times. It wasn't he started differently. Anyone would have. No, she said quietly. They wouldn't have. He didn't argue with that. Outside, the highway lights blurred past and Lily made a small sound in her sleep and didn't wake. And they carried them home through the dark with the steady, unremarkable reliability of a thing that simply kept working, which was, Elena was beginning to understand, the most important quality anything could have. The false calendar entry went up on a Wednesday. It was elegant in its specificity, a notation that Lily would be attending a private birthday party at the Belmore Park Recreation Center the following Saturday, 11 o'clock in the morning, with a guest list of 6 children from her class. No party existed. No invitations had been sent. It was a piece of bait built from the exact kind of routine, semi-public information that would be useless to anyone with innocent intentions and very useful to anyone who was tracking her daughter's movements. Elena put it in the shared calendar at 9 o'clock in the morning on Wednesday and told no one she'd done it.